Thank you so much, sir. Dear audience, we are really honored to have General Shah among us to talk to us on the issue of internal security. Today's title is A Strong and Alert India, Policies of Internal Security and Their Impact, which is being conducted as a part of Amrit Kal Vimarsh Vision India 2047. And the thoughts, wisdom and experiences that we will get to listen are not the academic knowledge alone, but the lived experience, since he is an army veteran and he has been responsible for handling these issues firsthand. So let me also take the privilege of saying few words about General Shah. Lieutenant General Zamiruddin Shah, Param Vishishta Seva Medal, Sena Medal, Vishishta Seva Medal, is a retired senior general of the Indian Army. He last served as the Deputy Chief of Army Staff, Personnel and System, Indian Army. After retirement, he served for some time as the administrative member of the bench of Armed Forces Tribunal. He was the Vice Chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University. General Shah attended the National Defence Academy in Khadakwasla, Pune. He was commissioned with the 185 Light Regiment Camel Pack on 9th of June 1968. He also commanded 170 Medium Regiment V Rajputs. General Shah was later the Colonel Commandant of the Regiment of Artillery. He was also the Indian military attached to Saudi Arabia. General Shah holds a Master of Science degree in Defence Science from the University of Madras and a Master of Philosophy degree from Devi Ahilya University, Indore. His bioprofile is too long and due to paucity of time, I may not read the entire bioprofile, but we are really grateful to have his august presence amongst us, and we are really thankful for he consented to be amongst us and to enlighten us. So, dear audience, please welcome our chief guest and the speaker, General Shah, with huge round of applause.
Jen, are you aware of why a soldier always soldiers wish each other Jen? Because it has no connotation to religion, caste, creed, state, only to the country. So that is why we have adopted the salutation of Jai Hind, country and only country. Professor Kar, Principal of Shamlal College, teachers and my dear students. It is a singular honor to speak to you, and I am very happy to put across my thoughts on a subject which is all of you, strong and alert India. We all want that. In fact, I served 40 years in the army to have a strong and alert India. Policies of internal security and their impact. Now I will cover the topic in something slightly different way than what you were expecting. If you are under the impression that internal security is dependent only on strong coercive methods with a very, very keen intelligence, then I'm afraid you are mistaken. What happened to Israel? I visited Israel several times and I was very impressed by the security measures, by their intelligence. But what did the Hamas do? Why did it do it? Because over a period of time, Israel, despite its military strength, despite its very active intelligence, despite its police, the Hamas could penetrate into Israel and create havoc and arson, murder, crimes of the highest order. So what happened to Israel? Hamas could penetrate Israel because at this point of time, Israel is badly divided and politicized. And so, the nation was busy fighting with each other instead of fighting the enemy, which was the greatest danger. The military too had got divided. There are loyalties of some of the military not going to fight, some of the military saying no, we must fight. All this is something which every country has to look into and prevent. That means the politicization of the armed forces. The armed forces must not get divided, must not indulge in politics. They must only look at one aim, and that is protection of the external and internal security of the country. Remember, boys and girls, that internal security, internal problems will only arise in case you have a dissatisfied section of the population. If you have a dissatisfied section, they will invariably create social and military problems. So one thing which a country must do is not create or look into the problems of the dissatisfied sections. What did Israel do? It has almost 20 or 30% of Arab population. They were forced into ghettos. There were high walls. If you go to Tel Aviv, you will find high walls separating the Jews and the Arabs. The Arabs are living in total ghettos, total poverty, and the Jews are living in very, very good conditions. So that was the ideal ground to create social problems and to create terrorist organizations like the Hamas. So in India, if we are to prevent these social problems, we have got to make sure that all sections of the population are integrated, they live together, and we have to strive to eliminate the ghettos which are prevalent in all major cities. That is the sad fact of life. India should work towards eliminating the ghettos which are the source of poverty and dissatisfaction. The second thing is India must develop strong and friendly relations with neighbors. Why? Because for internal problems, one is you have a dissatisfied population, and secondly, you have neighbors who will fan the flames of dissatisfaction. I served many years in the Northeast, in Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura. Most of my service was in the Northeast, and I studied this problem of Naga, Mizo, the Maiti, the Manipuri insurgency. It was because that section of the population was dissatisfied with the terms they were given. They were dissatisfied because there were no lines of communication, there were no railways in the Northeast, the means of communication were very poor, communications were bad, very bad agriculture, but above all, they had China and at one point of time, East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. Now that problem of Bangladesh fanning insurgency and dissatisfaction is over. We have developed very good relations with Bangladesh. China, because of its stress on eliminating poverty in the country, I think the Chinese have performed a miracle in economic development of their country, in modernization of the military. They also got disinterested. Otherwise, we had large Naga and Mizo gangs being trained in China and coming back and spreading a lot of disorder. So we have to have good, friendly relations with neighbors to avoid them giving aid and sustenance to people who want to create disorder and disharmony in the country. Of course, we have a neighbor like Pakistan, which has been fanning insurgency in Kashmir and in Punjab. For that sort of neighbor, I think at some point of time, a coercive response is necessary. That means a military response against an openly hostile neighbor is the only answer which India gave after Fulmaun. So I've explained to you how insurgency, how internal disorder arises. That means an unhappy section of the population and a neighbor which helps that section into violence, into other unlawful means. So the prerequisites of a strong India, of course, that is a militarily strong India, is a must. But for internal security, the first requirement is unity. The unity of the country is paramount. Dissatisfied sections of the populace, their cause of dissatisfaction must be addressed and rectified. That is, we have to eliminate religious, caste and economic fault lines between all communities. That is why the army is the epitome of elimination of all these fault lines. In the armed forces, religion is your private business. Soldiers are deeply religious, but that is very much part of their personal lives. Soldiers, unlike what has happened in Israel, also have to remain apolitical. That means a soldier has no business to be meddling in politics. Once they do that, that is a very, very extremely dangerous trend for the security of our country. The armed forces, of which there are members from every community. Let me tell you that in the 1970 war, my regiment was deployed at Longewala. It was a regiment of Rajputs, but the composition of the officers, of the 16 officers in the regiment who fought shoulder to shoulder in 1971 was, there were 2 Christians, 2 Sikhs, 2 Muslims and 1 Jew. That was the composition of my regiment with which I fought, troops 100% Rajputs, but the officers, I said, the religion of the officers is the religion of the men. That is the strength of our Indian armed forces. The second thing is that we were blessed that there was no political interference in the armed forces. Our senior leaders ensured that the Army and the Navy and the Air Force remained insulated from political and religious pressures and undertones. The armed forces are subordinate to political authority. That is the strength of Indian democracy. We've never had a coup. We never had the armed forces taking power because they were subordinate to political authority. But mind you, they were not subservient to political authority. That means they were free to air their opinions whenever required. I'll give you another example. In 1971, the Prime Minister was very keen that the Indian Armed Forces go into East Pakistan in June 1971. There was a lot of political pressure on General, later Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw to launch operations, but he resisted that and advised the Prime Minister that June was a very bad month to go into operations. Why? For 2 reasons. One is that the passes in the north were open and that could invite Chinese intrusion into India. Second reason which he gave to the political masters were that Bangladesh has a large number of rivers and canals, and those rivers would be in spate. That means they would be in floods in June, July. The political leadership accepted this advice. So I repeat again, the armed forces must remain apolitical. They must retain religious as a private matter, and the armed forces are subordinate but not subservient to political authority. That is the strength of the armed forces and the strength of India. Unfortunately, this has not happened to the police. The police has become totally subservient to political authority. And the police is the first weapon which is used to curb law and order and other things. But if they are subservient, if they participate in law and order problems, then they cannot perform their legitimate duty for the internal security of the country, because they are part of it. And I don't blame the police, because they are from that area. They are subject to pulls and pressures of that particular region. So it is the armed forces, of course, have been kept away. We have the second rung of security, that is the paramilitary forces. You know, the Assam Rifles, the CRPF, the BSF. Those must be kept away from political pressures and political interference. Fortunately, they have remained so, and they are not affected by political and religious biases. That's very, very important. Security of the country, internal security, I'm talking of internal security. You must remember that there should be no dissatisfied section of the population. So, India adopted the model of unity in diversity. We have diversity, but we have first-rate unity because of the policies of the government. Remember, boys and girls, I always give this example. India is equal to 5 fingers of your hand. The Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, the Buddhists, and the Sikhs. 5 fingers. Now what happens if you get a small injury on your small finger? Will you be able to clasp your fingers into a fist and use it for the security of your country? No, you can't, because your small finger is fractured. So that means your entire hand has been rendered impotent. Remember that. All communities, the 5 major ones, are the fingers that give strength to the male fist of India. This is vital for you to understand. Remember, the country is an orchestra of various instruments. Can be a tabla, harmonium, sitar. But what happens if one of the instruments plays out of tune? Have you heard any orchestra where the instruments are not in tune? Pretty jarring to the ears, isn't it? The orchestra must play in symphony. So in India, all the communities are important. They must work and fight together against external and internal aggression and disorder by playing like an orchestra in symphony. The world has heard of the music of India during the G20 summit, when the theme was "The world is one." That was a very important theme put across by our country. And I would add, all communities in India are one. We are one nation, and we are 5 fingers of the same hand. So unity is #1 factor for internal security. The next, which you may not think important, but I personally feel, discipline and character building. Let me tell you a little about China. China was a country which perceived a lot of threat from its neighbors, Mongolia, Japan, Korea. So what they did, they decided to make the Great Wall of China. All of you have heard of it? Yes. They thought that the Great Wall of China could protect them from external aggression. But what happened? China was conquered and overrun 3 times within 100 years of construction of the Great Wall of China. What does that show you? That walls and barriers cannot keep the country safe. The security of the country can only come in case, yes, how did they penetrate the Great Wall of China? They penetrated it by bribing the guards who opened the gates for them. So that is why we have to enforce discipline. We have to do character building amongst the citizens so that they don't open the gates to the enemy. That is vital, and I thought I must bring out this lesson. So the enemies of China didn't need to penetrate the walls. They just walked in through the gates. So the Chinese spent a lot of money and effort in building the wall, just like Israel did. They spent a lot of time on their security, fences, everything else. But what they did not look into was unity of their country amongst all sections and the character. The Chinese forgot that character too has to be built to prevent an enemy from overrunning the country. So the Chinese realized that the best defense against an enemy, the best defense for external and internal security is not a fortified wall, but building the human character of all its citizens, building discipline amongst all sections of the population. I'm afraid this quality of self-discipline needs to be further improved. I mean, you have seen it, all the rubbish lying on the streets, lying all over, misbehavior against the opposite sex. I think we need to enforce the strength of character of our population if we want internal security of our country. The Himalayas never protected us. The Chinese came in, they crossed the Himalayas, unfortunately. How did the British, who had very few soldiers, conquer and subjugate India, which was at its peak during those times in 16th century, 17th century? India was the powerhouse of the world. But what happened? A handful of Britons, not only their army, but the East India Company. It was a company. It overran the great India which we thought existed because of Mir Jafars, the enemies who opened the gates for the Chinese. We had people who switched sides, opened the gates of India to the British and we were conquered. Next thing, for the internal security of our country is education and research. You are lucky that you are studying in a first-rate college with a NAC A++ grading. Let me tell you, boys and girls, that is a grade which has been achieved by the efforts of your principal and the staff, the teaching staff, through a lot of effort. And I am sure that they were aided, helped by the discipline of the student community. That is vital. What are the other problems? We in India neglected the education which was spread across Southeast Asia and reached Japan. We neglected it all. At the core of this entrenched process was our lack of data utilization. That means we neglected to do our research, we neglected to enthuse new measures. Europe did not do that. They looked at education and enlightenment. We abandoned it. We had it in ample measure. But India, due to some circumstances, abandoned it. So what happened? We were not blessed with the Industrial Revolution, just like the West. We remained backwards. We didn't invent anything. We kept relying on everything. Even needles were imported into India at one point of time. So Britain or England had data utilization. They did a lot of research in industry, armaments, steamships, everything else. And so a handful of Britons conquered almost the whole of this vast continent. India had invented quality steel, numericals, geometry, but we failed to match the Europeans for some reason. We have to do quality research. We have to. Now, I've always said, whenever I go to my old university, Aligarh Muslim University, I tell the researchers, your research should not only be different, but your research must be unique. It has to stand out. Why is it that we are not major recipients of the Nobel Prize for science, for peace, for anything, for arts? Because we don't do anything unique. We have got to transform research. We've got to work harder in producing letters, articles, scientific knowledge which is unique and beneficial for the whole world. In India, unfortunately, parents spend more money on their daughter's wedding than they spend on our education. I think we've got to reverse this whole process. We have got to stop wasting money on various issues and concentrate on educating our daughters, not only daughters, our sons too. But I think the stress should lie on educating the daughters, which a lot of Indian parents frequently neglect. You are lucky. You girls, your parents have sent you to a first-rate college, but all girls in India don't have this wonderful facility. We know what education has done. Chandrayaan 3 was a great success, basically because it enhances India's military capabilities, and it was entirely because of the quality research done by our scientists. India must become the driving engine of the world. Once it becomes the driving engine, let me assure you that the flow of all that will also be internal security. We don't have to worry about dissensions and fights amongst various lot of people which are injurious to the unity and security of our country. Let us see what the Japanese and the Chinese did after the Second World War. They were all devastated by the war, which ranged from 1936 to 1944. Japan had been totally finished. Nagasaki and Hiroshima had been devastated by the atomic weapons. So what did they do? They decided that the best security and progress of their country depended on quality education. Quality education. They decided, let me tell you that at one point of time in the 1920s, Japan devoted 64% of its GDP on education. What is the Indian allocation to education? Maximum 4%. Compared to 64% which the Japanese dedicated or spent on education. So the need of the hour, I'm not talking of other methods to ensure security. Security will come if you have a vibrant, educated population. Some figures which should get you thinking. Japan has 95% high school graduates. India has only 11%. Of course, the new government has given a lot of stress on education, but I'm just giving you the figures which should make you wake up. College education. Japan, 53.7% are college graduates. China has only 8%, but they are catching up very rapidly. They are sending a whole lot of students to the West. They are catching up. India, college graduates, 4.5%. So you are lucky to be in that 4.5%. We have got to transform the face of our country on the strength of knowledge and education. We have a very young population. That is a big advantage which we are enjoying. It is called the demographic dividend. Have you heard of that name?
Yes.
The demographic dividend. We are enjoying it. It is a source of our strength. But if we don't grab that opportunity, this demographic dividend will become a demographic liability in the next 30 years. So we have to be very careful, because the population of India now is between 20 to 59 years. It's a very young profile. But it will hit 59% later. So we have to be very careful. Aging population, like has happened in Europe and America, China, because of the one family norm, which they realized was a classical blunder. They're correcting it and now encouraging larger families. So I stress again that security of our country will come by quality education. Quality education the country will jumpstart into the next century and will be secure against external and internal enemies. We must also examine how education, I'll let you know, has propelled the economies and industrial powerhouses of some of the countries. I've talked about the educational policy of Japan. How did it all start? In 1852, when Japan was a totally backward country. I mean, there was no comparison to India and Japan. India was miles ahead, 1852. An American steamship sailed into a Japanese port. And the Japanese woke up from their slumber. Oh, we are still using sailboats. This is a steam-driven ship. We've got to wake up. We've got to change. So what they did, they got hold of 50 monks. You know what a monk is? They're men of religion. And packed them off to universities in America and Europe, where they got their PhDs and came back enlightened. And they said, look, let's transform. Let religion not hold you back. Religion is a source of great strength, but it must not hold you back from scientific thinking. So these monks were the agents of change in the field of education in Japan. You all know where Japan is in the Committee of Nations. So the monks came back and they called it what the Meiji Restoration, akin to the Industrial Revolution in Europe. But they came back. I think we need to educate the men of religion of all faiths into modernity, developing a scientific temper and education. We cannot remain backwards and only bank on religion. That has to be combined with quality education. Both have strengths. Religion is very strong. An army man has a lot of faith in religion, but he is also well educated. You know that in Japan there's no illiteracy. In Israel there's no illiteracy. I give this example to my students. I used to give in AMU that 99.6% of Israeli children are high school pass, at least, if not college. So we've got to, for the security of our country, we need enlightened, disciplined, educated individuals. Don't think that security, internal security, can be given to you only by internal agencies and the police force. No. They are there. But basically, it is the citizens themselves who must ensure the security of their own country. Japan is not only a learner, but is also a great teacher. And India, at one point of time, was a great teacher. That is how Buddhism spread right across Asia. The birthplace of Buddhism is India, and Lumbini, which is in Nepal, and right through Southeast Asia to Java and other places. We have got to reclaim that superior position which India of old had, and that will depend on you, young. If you remain disciplined, if you imbibe knowledge, India can achieve that. Some lessons for India. Japan managed to control and adroitly use outside influences while holding firmly to its unique culture. India's strength is that we are holding tightly, strongly to our unique Indian culture. Absolutely, that's the source of our strength, and it was the source of strength of Japan. We have to engage in global intellectual activity. That's vital for us, and we can only do it if there is quality education. So new ideas, don't close your mind to new ideas. I always say that even the most ridiculous idea may be the best. You are aware of how penicillin was invented? Are you aware of that? It was discovered by mistake, by something which the professor was doing, and suddenly he came across penicillin, which has saved millions of lives across the country because it was a unique idea. You have got vast knowledge at your disposal. The facilities of the internet, are there Wi-Fi facilities across the university? Do you have Wi-Fi? So you got knowledge of the entire world available to you at the punch of a key on your laptop or your mobile. So make use of it. We are, like Japan, sending vast numbers of students to study abroad. Unfortunately, what is happening is there has been a brain drain. The best students who are going abroad are choosing to remain where they study, and the countries which are absorbing them are not foolish. They know that this is the best capability of India, so let's retain them in our country. So they give you a green visa and something, and then citizenship of USA. India, for its own security, must reverse the brain drain. It has to be in the opposite direction, and I am glad to know that a large number of our entrepreneurs and students who are well placed are coming back. I gave you the example of the Buddhist priests who came and transformed the face of India. We need to do the same. Of all religious leaders, I mean, so far they've been used to giving lectures and harangues and something else. They need to change their orientation into scientific temper. We need to re-educate them. There's also a need for dialogue, a need for understanding between all communities. Towards that end, a few of my friends and I are carrying out this process of dialogue with the RSS. We are not shying away from the fact that we've been criticized, but we couldn't care less if that contributes towards peace and security and better understanding between all communities, so vital for the internal security of our country.